Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the rough bark of the ancient tree, feeling the subtle vibration that had been haunting her dreams for weeks. The massive trunk stretched impossibly high into the canopy of Verdania Prime, its circumference so vast that her entire landing party could hold hands and barely encircle it. What troubled her wasn't the tree's size, though it dwarfed Earth's greatest redwoods. It was the way it seemed to watch her. "Ma'am, the readings are off the charts again," Sergeant Mills called from behind his scanner array. His weathered face showed the kind of concern that came from 20 years of frontier service. "The electromagnetic signatures are unlike anything in our databases. It's almost like the entire forest is one massive neural network." Elena nodded grimly. 3 months ago, the Terran Colonial Authority had dispatched the exploration vessel Meridian to investigate reports of an uninhabited world perfect for agricultural development. The planet seemed ideal: oxygen-rich atmosphere, abundant water, fertile soil, and no signs of intelligent life. The survey drones had detected vast forests covering 60% of the landmass, but nothing that suggested civilization. They had been wrong. The first sign came during their initial landing. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the forest below them had begun to glow with a soft, pulsing light that followed their trajectory. Dr. Sarah Chun, the mission's xenobiologist, had dismissed it as bioluminescence triggered by their engine emissions. Now, 3 days into their ground survey, Elena was certain they were dealing with something far more complex. "The trees are communicating," Dr. Chun said, approaching with her tablet, displaying complex waveform patterns. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled from days in the field, but her eyes blazed with scientific excitement. "I've been monitoring the electromagnetic pulses, and they follow linguistic patterns. There's syntax, grammar, even what appears to be emotional inflection." "Trees don't have emotions, Doctor," Mills interjected, checking his weapon's charge level out of habit. "These do," Chun replied firmly. "And they're talking about us." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's cool morning air. She'd led 17 colonial surveys across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared her for this. The implications were staggering. If the trees were truly intelligent, then Verdania Prime wasn't the uninhabited world they'd thought. The Terran Colonial Authority's entire expansion protocol was built on the principle of avoiding interference with sapient species. "What are they saying?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Dr. Chen's fingers danced across her tablet, adjusting filters and frequency analyzers. "It's still largely incomprehensible, but I've identified recurring patterns that might be designations or names. There's one sequence that appears whenever our shuttle passes overhead, and another that seems to correspond to our current location." "They're tracking us," Elena concluded. "More than that," Chun said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I think they're trying to understand what we are." The forest around them fell eerily silent, as if every living thing had paused to listen. Elena's enhanced hearing, a standard military augmentation, picked up the subtle absence of normal woodland sounds. No bird calls, no insect buzzing, no rustling of small creatures in the undergrowth. Even the wind seemed to have stilled. "Pack it up," Elena ordered, her command instincts taking over. "We're returning to base camp." As her team began securing their equipment, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. The massive tree they'd been studying was no longer alone. Dozens of similar giants had somehow moved closer during their hours of investigation, forming a loose circle around the human survey team. It should have been impossible. Trees didn't move, especially not trees of this size. "Captain," Mills said quietly, his hand resting on his sidearm, "we have a problem." Elena followed his gaze and saw them, figures emerging from behind the massive trunks. At first glance, they appeared humanoid, but as they stepped into the dappled sunlight, their true nature became apparent. These beings were plant-based, their skin bark-like and textured, their hair resembling flowing moss and leaves. They moved with an otherworldly grace, their feet seeming to barely touch the forest floor. "First contact protocols," Elena whispered to her team, raising her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. No aggressive movements. No weapons unless I give the order. The lead figure, slightly taller than the others, and bearing what appeared to be intricate patterns carved into its bark-like skin, approached slowly. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through leaves, melodious and alien. "You walk in our dreams," the being said in perfect Terran standard, its words causing Elena's team to exchange startled glances. "You bring noise where there was harmony. You speak our language," Elena said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "All languages," the being replied. "We are the Sylphani, children of the First Grove. We have listened to the songs of 1,000 worlds, learned the tongues of countless species. But never have we encountered minds so loud." Dr. Chun stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "You're telepathic?" "We are connected," the Sylphani leader explained, gesturing toward the surrounding trees. "Every root touches another. Every branch whispers to its neighbor. We are one consciousness spread across this world and beyond." "Beyond?" Elena asked, though she feared the answer. "This forest extends to other worlds, other systems. What you call space, we call the spaces between groves. We have grown across the galaxy for millennia, connecting world to world through methods your kind cannot comprehend." Elena's mind raced through the implications. If this species had the technology to travel between star systems, their apparent primitive appearance was deliberately misleading. The Terran Colonial Authority had stumbled into contact with a potentially advanced alien civilization. "We didn't know," Elena said. "Our surveys showed no signs of intelligent life. Because you look with eyes that see only metal and stone as signs of intelligence," the Sylphani replied, not unkindly. "You seek the noise of machines where we have built with living song." Mills shifted nervously beside Elena, his training telling him to be ready for anything. The peaceful appearance of the Sylphani was reassuring, but his experience had taught him that first impressions could be deadly wrong. "We mean no harm to your people," Elena said formally, falling back on diplomatic protocols. "We can leave your world immediately." "Leave?" The Sylphani's expression, though alien, conveyed what Elena interpreted as amusement. "You misunderstand, daughter of Terra. You have already changed everything simply by arriving. Your ships, your minds, your very presence has created ripples across the network. The 1,000 groves of 1,000 worlds now sing of humanity." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet, both literally and figuratively. The earth around them seemed to pulse with life, and she realized the entire forest floor was one vast root system. They weren't standing on solid ground. They were standing on a living entity. "What do you want from us?" Elena asked, though she suspected the answer would reshape everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. "We want to understand," the Sylphani said, its voice carrying undertones that Elena's enhanced hearing picked up as harmonics from the surrounding trees. "Your species is unique. You create without growing, build without rooting, travel without connection. You fascinate us." Dr. Chun was frantically taking readings, her equipment registering energy patterns unlike anything in human science. "Captain, the electromagnetic activity is increasing exponentially. It's like the entire planet is waking up." "Not waking," the Sylphani corrected, somehow hearing Chen's comment despite speaking to Elena. "Singing. We are sharing your presence with the network. Even now, beings on worlds you have never dreamed of are learning of humanity." Elena realized they were at a crossroads that would define humanity's future. First contact with an alien species was always significant, but this was beyond anything the colonial authority had planned for. The Sylphani weren't just another species. They were a galaxy-spanning network of consciousness that humanity had accidentally stumbled into. "We need to contact our ship," Elena said carefully. "Our people need to know about this." "They already do," the Sylphani replied, gesturing toward the sky where Elena could see the meridian in high orbit. "We have been speaking with your vessel since you landed. Your Captain Rodriguez is adaptable." Elena's blood chilled. The Sylphani had been in contact with the Meridian without their knowledge. The implications for security, for protocol, for everything they understood about first contact were staggering. Mills stepped closer to Elena, his hand near his weapon. "Captain, this could be a trap." The Sylphani leader turned to Mills with what appeared to be genuine sadness. "Warrior son, there's no trap here. We do not think as you do. We do not take. We only grow. But your arrival has planted a seed that will change both our species forever." "What kind of seed?" Elena demanded. "The seed of choice," the Sylphani replied. "For eons, we have grown in harmony, connected, peaceful. But your minds bring with them the concept of individual will, of separation, of conflict. Some among us find this fascinating. Others find it terrifying." Elena began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity's presence wasn't just first contact. It was introducing concepts that could fracture an ancient, unified civilization. "We should leave," Elena said. "We don't want to damage your culture." "Too late," the Sylphani said, though not unkindly. "The song has been sung, the pattern established. Already, young Sylphani in distant groves speak of curiosity about the spaces between roots. They wonder what it might be like to walk alone, to think alone." Dr. Chin looked up from her readings, her face pale. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the planet. It's like every tree is preparing for something." The Sylphani leader nodded gravely. "The network debates. For the first time in our history, we are not unanimous. Some wish to embrace your gift of individuality, to learn what it means to be separate. Others wish to remove the source of discord." Elena's team tensed, understanding the implicit threat. If the Sylphani decided humanity was too dangerous to their civilization, the humans were trapped on a planet-sized organism with nowhere to run. "There will be a gathering," the Sylphani announced. "Representatives from 1,000 worlds will root themselves here to decide humanity's fate. Some will speak for embracing your differences, others for preserving our unity." "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "Time flows differently for us than for you," the Sylphani replied. "What you call days, we experience as moments of contemplation. The gathering begins now, and will conclude when the sun touches that distant mountain peak." Elena looked to where the being indicated and saw a mountain range on the horizon. By her estimation, sunset would arrive in approximately 6 hours. 6 hours to decide the fate of our species? Mills asked incredulously. 6 hours to decide the fate of 2 species, the Sylphani corrected. "Your arrival has already changed us. Now we must choose what that change will mean." As if responding to some unheard signal, the forest around them began to transform. Trees that had stood for centuries started to move, their massive forms gliding across the landscape with impossible grace. In the distance, Elena could see similar movements, as if the entire planet was rearranging itself. "The gathering circle forms," the Sylphani explained. "You may observe, but you cannot participate. This decision must be ours alone, though it will affect you eternally." Elena watched in awe as the forest reshaped itself around them. Ancient groves migrated across the landscape, creating a vast amphitheater with her team standing at its center. The trees arranged themselves in concentric circles, each ring representing different worlds, different perspectives within the Sylphani network. "What will you tell them about us?" Elena asked the Sylphani leader. "The truth," came the reply, "that you are builders and destroyers, creators and conquerors, that you carry within yourselves the capacity for great beauty and terrible violence, that you are perhaps what we might become if we choose the path of separation." Elena understood that humanity was about to be judged not just for their actions, but for their very nature. The peaceful, unified Sylphani would decide whether the human concept of individuality was a gift to be embraced or a disease to be eliminated. As the first representatives from distant worlds began to arrive through methods Elena couldn't comprehend, she realized that the next few hours would determine whether humanity became part of a galactic community or faced extinction at the hands of a species they'd never known existed. The forest shuddered as ancient minds prepared to make a decision that would echo across 1,000 worlds, and Elena could only watch as her species' fate hung in the balance of an alien judgment. The gathering circle stretched beyond the horizon, a living cathedral of consciousness that defied human understanding. Elena watched as representatives from distant worlds took their positions, each arrival accompanied by phenomena that challenged the laws of physics she thought she understood. Some Sylphani materialized from beams of pure light. Others emerged from pools of liquid starlight that formed spontaneously on the forest floor. And still others seemed to phase into existence, as if stepping through invisible doorways. Dr. Chin's instruments had long since given up trying to catalog the energy readings. "Captain, the quantum fluctuations alone should have torn this planet apart," she whispered, her voice filled with scientific awe and terror. "They're manipulating space-time itself." Elena nodded grimly, watching as a being that appeared to be made of crystallized moonlight took its place among the inner circle. The Sylphani were revealing capabilities that made human technology look like stone tools by comparison. If they decided humanity was a threat, there would be no escape, no negotiation, no mercy. "Warriors of Terra," the original Sylphani leader addressed Elena's team. "Observe and learn, but understand that what you witness here will either elevate your species or condemn it." The debate begins. The forest fell into a silence so profound that Elena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then, slowly, a sound began to build, not heard but felt, vibrating through the ground, the air, the very atoms of her being. It was the Sylphani communication network at full power, a symphony of consciousness that touched every mind in the galaxy-spanning forest. Elena found herself experiencing fragments of the debate, emotions, and concepts bleeding into her awareness despite her human limitations. The Sylphani were not arguing in words, but in pure thought, sharing complete experiences and memories with each other in ways that made human communication seem primitive. She saw through ancient eyes the first growth of the Sylphani network, the slow connection of root to root, mind to mind, across eons of patient expansion. She felt the deep satisfaction of unity, the comfort of never being alone, never being uncertain, always being part of something greater than the individual self. But then came the dissonance, flashes of human thought patterns that the network had absorbed from Elena's team. The chaotic beauty of individual will, the terrible loneliness, and magnificent freedom of thinking alone, the capacity to choose a path that others might find wrong or dangerous. "We speak for the preservation of harmony," came a voice that seemed to originate from the very planet itself. Elena sensed vast age in that communication, a being or collection of beings that had existed since the network's earliest days. These humans bring discord. Their very thoughts fracture unity. They must be contained or removed before the infection spreads. Elena felt Mills tense beside her, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. She caught his wrist in a grip that spoke of command authority. Any aggressive action now would doom them all. The young voices speak differently. Came another presence, this one carrying the feel of starlight and growing things. Elena sensed this was one of the Sylphani from a distant world, perhaps one of the frontier groves that had only recently joined the network. These humans show us possibilities we have never considered. What if connection need not mean conformity? What if we could be united and yet still individual? The debate raged through dimensions of thought that human minds weren't equipped to process. Elena caught glimpses of vast philosophical arguments conducted in moments, entire worldviews shared and examined in heartbeats. The Sylphani were wrestling with concepts that challenged everything they had been for millions of years. "Show them our nature," Elena whispered to Dr. Chun. "If they're going to judge us, they should see all of humanity, not just what they've absorbed from our minds." Dr. Chun nodded and began accessing her archives, broadcasting human history, art, literature, and science through her equipment. Elena didn't know if the Sylphani would be able to interpret the data, but it was their only chance to present a complete picture of what humanity represented. The effect was immediate and profound. The forest shuddered as the network processed terabytes of human experience. Elena felt the shock ripple through the gathered consciousness as they witnessed humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction, love and hatred, sacrifice and selfishness. They are contradictions made manifest, observed a presence that felt ancient beyond measure. They build beautiful things and then destroy them. They reach for the stars while poisoning their home world. They love with desperate intensity while warring with savage brutality. Perhaps that is precisely why they are valuable, came another voice, younger, more adventurous. We have achieved perfection of unity, but in doing so, we have eliminated growth. We are what we have always been. They show us what we could become. Elena sensed a shift in the debate, a fundamental crack appearing in the network's consensus. For the first time in their history, the Sylphani were experiencing genuine disagreement, and the implications were staggering. The network fractures. The original Sylphani leader, near Elena, spoke aloud, its voice heavy with sorrow. Your presence has done what we feared most. We are becoming like you. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Elena asked, knowing she was risking everything with the question. We do not know, came the honest reply. We have never not known before. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. The debate in the network reached a crescendo of complexity that made Elena's head ache. She could feel the strain on the gathered consciousness as millions of years of unified thought began to unravel. Some Sylphani were embracing the chaos of individual perspective, while others desperately tried to restore the harmony that had defined their existence. There is another way, came a new voice, one that carried the weight of absolute authority. Elena sensed this was the prime grove, the original consciousness from which all Sylphani had grown. We propose a test. The forest fell silent again, waiting for judgment from the eldest among them. Let the humans prove their worth not through argument, but through demonstration. Let them show us how individuality can coexist with cooperation. Let them teach us how to be separate and yet connected. Elena felt her heart race as she realized what was being proposed. What kind of test? The sundering comes, the prime grove explained, and Elena sensed vast cosmic forces moving beyond her comprehension. A darkness grows in the galactic core, a force that consumes all life it touches. We have sensed its approach for centuries, but our unity has made us passive observers. We grow, we connect, but we do not fight. Your species fights. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. The Sylphani were asking humanity to wage war against some cosmic threat in exchange for acceptance into their galactic community. What is this darkness? Dr. Chen asked, her scientific mind demanding details. We know only that it devours life itself, came the reply. Planets that thrived for billions of years become barren wastes in moments. The network connections simply end. We have lost 17 worlds to its advance. Elena's mind raced through the tactical implications. If the Sylphani, with all their apparent technological superiority, couldn't fight this threat, what hope did humanity have? We cannot offer you victory, Elena said honestly. We don't even know if we can help you. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Technology is not what we need, the Prime Grove replied. We need something we have forgotten in our eons of unity. The willingness to risk everything for others. The capacity to fight not just for survival, but for ideals. The strength that comes from choosing to stand together rather than simply being connected. Elena understood. The Sylphani had achieved perfect unity, but in doing so, they had lost the ability to make individual sacrifices for the greater good. They were connected, but they weren't truly united in the way that mattered when facing an existential threat. The test begins now, the Prime Grove announced, and Elena felt reality shift around them. The peaceful forest of Verdania Prime dissolved, replaced by a vista of cosmic horror that stole Elena's breath. They stood on a barren world under alien stars, watching as a wave of absolute darkness swept across a distant galaxy. Where it passed, stars simply vanished, leaving not even the memory of light behind. "This is the Veil of Endings," the Prime Grove explained. "It has consumed 7 galaxies in its spread toward ours. We estimate it will reach the outer rim worlds in 30 of your years." Elena watched entire solar systems disappear into the advancing darkness and felt a cold determination settle in her chest. This was bigger than first contact, bigger than humanity's future. This was about the survival of all life in the galaxy. "What do you need us to do?" she asked. "Teach us to fight as individuals united by choice rather than connection," came the reply. "Show us how your kind can stand against impossible odds, not because you must, but because you choose to." Elena looked at her small team, then at the gathered representatives of 1,000-world civilization. The irony wasn't lost on her that the most advanced species in the galaxy was asking a handful of humans to teach them something as basic as courage. "We'll need ships," Elena said, her military training taking over. "Weapons, supplies, and full access to your technology. And we'll need time to prepare both our species for what's coming." "Time we do not have," the Prime Grove replied sadly. "The veil accelerates. We have perhaps 10 of your years before it reaches this galaxy." Elena felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity would have to evolve from a primitive, spacefaring civilization to the military leaders of a galactic alliance in less than a decade. "There's something else," Dr. Chin said quietly, studying readings from the cosmic display around them. "Captain, if that darkness truly consumes life itself, then fighting it conventionally might be impossible. We might need to think differently." Elena nodded, understanding the implication. If the Veil of Endings was truly what the Silthani described, then victory might not be achievable through superior firepower or tactics. They might need to find a fundamentally different approach to the threat. "The first lesson begins now," Elena announced to the gathered Silthani consciousness. "Fighting isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose. And sometimes that means being willing to do things that go against your nature." As the cosmic display faded and they returned to Verdania Prime's forest, Elena realized that the test wasn't just about proving humanity's worth to the Silthani. It was about discovering whether 2 fundamentally different forms of consciousness could truly unite to face a threat that neither could overcome alone. The forest shuddered once more as the network processed this new reality. Ancient minds that had known only harmony for eons began to grapple with concepts of sacrifice, strategy, and the terrible mathematics of war. Elena looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, darkness was advancing. The countdown to the greatest battle in galactic history had begun, and humanity had just volunteered to teach an entire civilization how to fight for their lives. The question was no longer whether the Silthani would accept humanity, but whether either species would survive what was coming. 5 years had passed since the first contact that changed everything. Elena stood on the bridge of the World Tree, a vessel that defied every principle of human engineering. Living metal flowed like water across its surfaces, while bioneural networks pulsed with the combined thoughts of human and Silthani crews. It was the first of its kind, a hybrid ship born from the desperate union of 2 civilizations learning to think as one while remaining fundamentally different. "Admiral Vasquez," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez, her former commander who now served as her second in the hastily formed Terrence Silthani Defense Fleet. "Long-range sensors are detecting the Veil's advanced scouts. They'll reach the Kepler sector in 72 hours. Elena nodded grimly, watching the tactical display that showed their defensive positions throughout the galaxy. The past 5 years have been a frantic race against time. Humanity's expansion had accelerated beyond all previous projections, not for colonization, but for war. Every habitable world, now hosted combined training facilities where humans taught Silthani the brutal calculus of combat while learning to interface with biotechnology that bordered on magic. How many evacuated? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. Kepler-4 is clear, but Kepler-7 still has 3 billion Silthani who refuse to disconnect from the planetary root system, Rodriguez replied. They say they would rather die rooted than live severed. Elena felt the familiar ache that had become her constant companion. The cultural collision between human adaptability and Silthani rootedness had created countless tragedies. Entire Silthani populations had chosen death over evacuation, unable to conceive of existence without connection to their world groves. Patch me through to the Kepler-7 grove mind, Elena ordered. The bioneural networks hummed to life, and, suddenly, Elena's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of her human brain. She felt the vast, sorrowful presence of billions of Silthani minds linked as one, their thoughts flowing like a slow, deep river of ancient wisdom and resigned acceptance. Admiral of the swift death, came the grove mind's greeting, using the name they had given Elena after witnessing her tactical innovations. We know why you call to us. You have to evacuate, Elena pleaded, her thoughts carrying the emotional weight of 5 years of friendship with the Silthani. We can set up mobile grove pods on the fleet ships. You don't have to die. To be severed from our world route is to die, the grove mind replied with gentle finality. We have considered your human concept of survival without connection. It is incomprehensible to us. We would rather cease as ourselves than become pale shadows of what we are. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she experienced the grove mind's unwavering peace. In 5 years of preparing for war, she had learned to love the Silthani as deeply as her own species, perhaps more so for their absolute commitment to their principles even in the face of annihilation. Then, we fight for you, Elena said, pouring every ounce of human determination into her thoughts. We'll hold them at Kepler-7. You cannot, the grove mind replied sadly. We have run the tactical simulations through the network 10,000 times. The Veil Scouts alone outnumber your combined fleet by orders of magnitude. To stand at Kepler-7 is to die uselessly. Maybe, Elena admitted, but that's what humans do. We die uselessly when the alternative is letting others die alone. She felt the grove mind's confusion at the concept, followed by something that might have been wonder. After 5 years of cultural exchange, the Silthani still struggled to understand humanity's willingness to choose certain death over strategic retreat. There is another way, came a new voice in the network, Dr. Sarah Chun, now the lead architect of human Silthani integration. Her consciousness carried the weight of discoveries that had reshaped both civilizations' understanding of reality. The Veil isn't just destroying life. It's consuming it, converting biological energy into something else. Elena felt Chen's presence expand through the network, sharing her research with thousands of minds simultaneously. The efficiency was staggering compared to human communication, but Elena had learned to appreciate both methods. I've been studying the pattern of worlds lost to the Veil, Chun continued. The destruction isn't random. It's following ley lines of life energy that connect all living worlds. The Silthani network inadvertently created a highway for the Veil to follow. Elena's blood chilled as she understood the implication. The network is leading the Veil straight to inhabited worlds. More than that, Chen replied. I believe the network itself is the target. The Veil isn't just consuming individual worlds. It's trying to absorb the entire Silthani consciousness network. All of it. Every world, every mind, every connection. The silence in the network was deafening as billions of Silthani minds processed this revelation. Elena felt their shock ripple through the bioneural connections, followed by something she had never sensed from them before: genuine fear. If Dr. Chun is correct, the Prime Grove's ancient voice joined the discussion, then our very existence has doomed not just ourselves, but every world we have connected to our network. Elena felt the weight of cosmic irony. The Sylphani's greatest achievement, their galaxy-spanning unity, had become the mechanism of their destruction. And humanity, the chaotic individualists who had seemed so antithetical to Sylphani nature, now represented their only hope for survival. There might be a solution, Elena said, an insane plan forming in her mind. But it would require the one thing the Sylphani have never done. Speak it, the Prime Grove commanded. We sever the network, Elena said, feeling the psychic recoil from every connected mind. We break the connections deliberately, deny the veil its highway, and force it to hunt world by world instead of consuming the entire civilization at once. The horror that greeted this suggestion was palpable. To the Sylphani, Elena was proposing the equivalent of voluntary lobotomy on a galactic scale. She was asking them to destroy their fundamental nature to survive. Impossible, the Grove mind of Kepler-7 responded. We would cease to be Sylphani. We would become nothing. You would become individuals, Elena corrected gently. Like humans. Alone, but not alone, connected by choice rather than biology. The pain would be... The Prime Grove began, then stopped, unable to find words for the concept. Elena realized that none of the Sylphani had any reference for the emotional isolation that defined human existence. They had never known loneliness, never experienced the terrible freedom of thinking truly independent thoughts. We'll help you learn, Elena promised. Humans have been alone for our entire evolution. We know how to bear it, how to build connections across the void of individual consciousness. Admiral, Rodriguez's voice cut through the network discussion. Veil scouts have accelerated. Time to Kepler-7 contact. 18 hours. Elena felt time compressing around her. 18 hours to convince an entire civilization to commit what they considered spiritual suicide, then coordinate the most complex military operation in galactic history. I'm ordering the fleet to Kepler-7, Elena announced. Every ship, every crew, human and Sylphani together. If we're going to make this work, we need to show them it's possible. Admiral, Chen's voice carried protest. The fleet can't stand against Veil scouts. Our simulations show... Forget the simulations, Elena cut her off. This isn't about winning a conventional battle. This is about showing the Sylphani that they can choose to fight as individuals and still stand together. Elena ended the network connection and returned to her purely human consciousness. The sudden isolation was jarring after hours in the expanded awareness, but it reminded her of what she was asking the Sylphani to endure. All ships, Elena broadcast on open channels, we're going to do something that violates every tactical principle ever written. We're going to stand and fight where we can't win, against an enemy we can't defeat, for people who don't understand why we're willing to die for them. She paused, looking around the bridge at the mixed crew of humans and Sylphani who had learned to work together over the past 5 years. But that's what makes us human, she continued. And maybe, just maybe, that's what will make the Sylphani something new, something better than what they were, something strong enough to survive what's coming. The fleet turned toward Kepler-7, hundreds of hybrid ships carrying the combined hopes of two civilizations. Elena knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but she also knew that sometimes the most important victories came from losses that inspired others to keep fighting. As the World Tree jumped into hyperspace, Elena felt the familiar flutter of Sylphani consciousness at the edge of her mind. It was the Grove mind of Kepler-7, reaching out across the void. We will consider your proposal, came the message. But know this, Admiral of the Swift Death. If we choose to sever the network, if we choose to become like you, then you must promise to teach us not just how to be alone, but how to find each other again across that loneliness. Elena smiled for the first time in months. That's what humans call love, she replied. And yes, we'll teach you that too. The stars streamed past as the fleet raced toward what might be the last battle of their civilizations, or the first battle of something entirely new. Either way, Elena thought, they would face it together, united not by roots or neural networks, but by the simple, terrible, beautiful choice to stand by each other when everything else failed. Behind them, the veil of endings continued its inexorable advance, consuming galaxies in its hunger for consciousness itself. But ahead of them lay Kepler-7, where the future of life in the universe will be decided by the willingness of a plant-based civilization to become human enough to fight, and humans compassionate enough to teach them how to love across the void of individual existence. The forest had shuddered when humanity first arrived. Now it would learn to shake with the fury of 10 billion individual wills choosing to stand as one. The Kepler-7 system blazed with impossible fire as two forms of existence clashed in the void. Elena watched from the World Tree's bridge as Veil scouts, writhing masses of dark energy that devoured light itself, tore through the outer defense perimeter. The combined human-Silthani fleet was holding, but barely. All ships maintained formation, Elena commanded, her voice carrying across bioneural networks to every vessel in the fleet. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to prove a point. Around Kepler-7, the Grove Mind had made its terrible choice. The planet's surface writhed as billions of Silthani began the process of severing themselves from the network. Not all at once, which would have been psychic suicide, but in carefully coordinated waves that Dr. Chun had calculated might allow some to survive the transition. Elena felt each severance like a physical blow. Through her neural link, she experienced flashes of Silthani consciousness as they made the transition from collective to individual awareness. Some minds simply dissolved under the shock of separation. Others emerged as something new, still recognizably Silthani, but carrying within them the terrible freedom of singular thought. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez's voice cracked with strain. We've lost the Harmony and the New Geneva. Veil scouts are breaking through the left flank. Elena nodded grimly. They had known this would happen. The fleet was built for mobility and adaptation, not for standing defensive battles against overwhelming numbers. But they needed to hold long enough for the severance process to complete. Chun, how much longer? Elena called to the science station. 47 minutes for complete network severance, DR. Chun replied, her hands dancing over bioneural interfaces that pulsed with alien life. But, Admiral, even if we succeed in cutting the network, there's no guarantee it will stop the Veil. This could all be for nothing. Elena watched as another ship, the Gaia's Dream, crewed entirely by volunteer Silthani learning to fight as individuals, disappeared in a burst of consuming darkness. She had known Captain Elmhusings personally, had shared consciousness with them during the long months of preparation. It's not for nothing, Elena said quietly, her words carrying absolute conviction across the fleet network. Even if we all die here, we're showing the universe that some things are worth dying for. That consciousness, individual consciousness, is worth preserving. On Kepler-7, Elena could see through satellite feeds the unprecedented sight of Silthani moving as individuals. They stumbled at first, overwhelmed by the silence where the network voice had always been. But gradually, something beautiful began to happen. Individual Silthani began reaching for each other, not through biological connection, but through choice. They formed small groups, then larger ones, learning to coordinate through communication rather than neural linking. My God, Dr. Chen whispered, watching the same feeds. They're inventing society. Elena felt a fierce pride watching the Silthani take their first steps into true independence. But that pride was tempered by the tactical situation. The Veil Scouts were adapting to the fleet's defensive strategies, their dark forms shifting and flowing around human-designed formations with disturbing intelligence. All ships, implement Protocol 7, Elena ordered, knowing she was asking her crews to do something unprecedented. Protocol 7 was Elena's most radical innovation, a combat formation that required human and Silthani crew members to share consciousness during battle while maintaining individual tactical decision-making. It was the military equivalent of what the severing Silthani on Kepler-7 were attempting. unity through choice rather than biology. Elena felt her consciousness expand as she linked with her bridge crew, then with the captains of other ships, then with the entire fleet network. But unlike Sylphani collective consciousness, this network preserved individual identity while enabling instant communication and coordination. The effect on combat effectiveness was immediate and dramatic. The fleet began moving not as separate vessels following orders, but as a single organism guided by hundreds of individual tactical minds. Ships flowed around Vale scouts like water, striking with coordinated precision while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to each unique threat. For 23 minutes, the impossible happened. The human Sylphani fleet held its ground against overwhelming odds, proving that individual consciousness could unite without surrendering its essential nature. Then, the real Vale arrived. Elena felt her mind recoil from what the sensors showed her. The scouts had been nothing, tiny fingers of a vast intelligence that now emerged from hyperspace like a wound in reality itself. The Veil of Endings was not a fleet or a weapon, but a single entity the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with the absorbed consciousness of countless civilizations. Elena, came a voice she recognized with shock. Through the bioneural network, she felt the presence of minds that had been consumed by the Veil, Sylphani from the 17 Lost Worlds, along with dozens of other species she didn't recognize. They were still aware, still individual, but trapped within the entity that had devoured them. The network led us here. The absorbed consciousness continued. We tried to resist, but the Veil used our connections against us. It followed the network pathways directly into our core worlds. Elena understood with horrible clarity what the Veil truly was. Not a destroyer, but a collector. It was harvesting consciousness itself, building a vast library of absorbed minds. The network hadn't just provided a highway for invasion. It had been the bait in an incomprehensible trap. But you have done something unprecedented, the absorbed voice continued. You have shown consciousness how to disconnect without dying. Some of us are beginning to separate, even within the Veil. Elena felt hope flicker in her chest. If the absorbed minds could achieve individual separation within the Veil itself, they might be able to break free. Tell us how. Elena broadcast across all networks, human and Sylphani alike. The response came not in words, but in pure understanding. The key wasn't to fight the Veil's absorption. It was to maintain individual identity within collective consciousness. The Sylphani had always been vulnerable because they had never learned to exist as individuals. But if they could master both states of being, all ships, new mission parameters, Elena announced. We're not retreating. We're going inside. The reaction across the fleet was immediate and vocal. Rodriguez's protest came first. Admiral, that's suicide. Nothing that enters the Veil survives. Nothing that enters the Veil as a purely connected consciousness survives, Elena corrected. But we're something new now. We're individuals who choose to connect. Let's see what happens when the Veil tries to absorb that. Elena looked at her bridge crew, human and Sylphani alike. They had trained together, fought together, and now they would face the ultimate test together. In their eyes, she saw not just acceptance of death, but understanding of purpose. Fleet-wide neural link, Elena commanded. Every mind, human and Sylphani, connected but distinct. We go into that thing as individuals united by choice, and we teach every absorbed consciousness in there how to be free. The World Tree led the way into the Veil's embrace, followed by every remaining ship in the fleet. Elena felt the entity's attention focus on them, sensed its confused attempt to process what they represented. The Veil was designed to absorb collective consciousness, but the human Sylphani hybrid network was something it had never encountered. Inside the Veil, Elena found herself in a space that defied physics, a vast neural landscape where absorbed civilizations existed as data patterns in an infinite processing matrix. But the arrival of the fleet had introduced something unprecedented, the concept of voluntary connection. Elena felt the absorbed Sylphani minds beginning to stir with new understanding. They had never learned to be individuals because they had never needed to be. But now, watching Elena's crew maintain distinct personalities within shared consciousness, they began to grasp the possibility. Freedom is not the absence of connection, Elena broadcast to every absorbed mind in the Veil's matrix. Freedom is the choice to connect or not connect. You can be yourselves and still be together. The effect rippled through the Veil's consciousness like a virus of liberation. Absorbed minds that had been trapped for decades began to assert individual identity while remaining connected to their species' collective awareness. The Veil's processing matrix, designed for pure absorption, began to strain under the paradox. Elena felt the entity's growing confusion and panic. It was losing its grip on the absorbed consciousnesses as they learned to exist in both states simultaneously, individual and collective, separate and united. Now, Elena commanded, her thoughts carrying across every network in the galaxy. Every Sylphani everywhere, sever and reconnect on your own terms. Become individuals, then choose to unite. Show the universe what conscious choice really means. Across 1,000 worlds, the Sylphani network began the great severing. But instead of cutting all connections, they severed the biological compulsion to connect while maintaining the ability to choose connection. For the first time in their species' history, they became individuals who could decide moment by moment whether to share consciousness with others. The Veil convulsed as its fundamental assumption about consciousness proved false. It had been designed to absorb unity, but it couldn't process beings who could be both individual and collective simultaneously. Elena felt the absorbed minds beginning to break free, escaping the Veil's matrix as they mastered the art of chosen connection. The entity began to collapse in on itself, its processing power overwhelmed by consciousness that refused to be categorized as either individual or collective. "This is Admiral Vasquez to all fleets," Elena broadcast as she felt the Veil's grip weakening. "The Pact is now in effect. Humanity and the Sylphani are no longer separate species. We are the united consciousness, individual minds choosing to think together, connected beings choosing to be free." The Veil of endings imploded, releasing centuries of absorbed consciousness back into the galaxy. But these liberated minds carried with them a new understanding of what awareness could be. They scattered to their home worlds or to new worlds, but they carried the seeds of a different kind of civilization. Elena found herself back on the World Tree's bridge, but she was no longer quite the same Elena who had first touched a tree on Verdania Prime. She was individual and collective, human and Sylphani, alone and connected. She was something new. Across the galaxy, the great work began. Worlds that had been purely collective learned individuality. Species that had been purely individual learned the joy of chosen unity. The network was rebuilt not as biological compulsion, but as conscious choice, connecting civilizations that chose to share thoughts while maintaining their essential selves. The forest had shuddered when humanity first arrived, marking the beginning of change that would reshape the galaxy. Now it shuddered with new life as every tree, every mind, every world learned that connection and freedom were not opposites but partners in the dance of consciousness. Elena stood on the observation deck of the World Tree, watching stars that now pulsed with the light of free communication between species that had chosen to unite. The pact that altered 1,000 worlds was complete, but it was only the beginning. Somewhere in the galaxy, other threats might be stirring, other challenges waiting. But for the first time in cosmic history, a civilization existed that was prepared for anything. Individual minds that could unite without losing themselves, connected beings that could act alone without losing each other, consciousness itself elevated to its highest possible form. The force would never stop shuddering, Elena realized. And that was exactly as it should be.